Chapter 1, page 17. How corn took over America. A field of corn. The average supermarket doesn't seem much like a field of corn. Take a look around one. What do you see? There's a large air-conditioned room. There are long aisles and shelves piled high with boxes and cans. There are paper goods and diapers and magazines. But that's not all. Look again. Somewhere behind the brightly colored packaging, underneath the labels covered with information, there is a mountain of corn. You may not be able to see it, but there it is. I'm not talking about the corn in the produce section. That's easy to recognize. In the spring and summer, the green ears of corn sit out in plain view with all other fruits and vegetables. You can see a stack of ears next to the eggplants, onions, apples, bananas, and potatoes. But that's not a mountain of corn, is it? Keep looking. Go through produce to the back of the supermarket and you'll find the meats. There's corn here too, but isn't a little harder to see. Where is it? Here's a hint. What did the cow and pigs and chickens eat before they became cuts of meat? Mainly corn. Go a little further now. There's still a lot of corn hiding in this supermarket. How about those long aisles of soft drinks made from corn? That freezer case stuffed with TV dinners, mostly corn. Those donuts and cookies and chips, they're made with a whole lot of corn. Supermarkets look like they contain a huge variety of food. The shelves are stuffed with thousands of different items. There are dozens of different soups and salad dressings, cases stuffed with frozen dinners and ice cream and meat. The range of food choices is amazing. Yet, if you look a little closer, you're beginning to discover it's all corn. Well, maybe not all corn, but there's still an awful lot of it hiding here, a lot more than you suspect. We think of our supermarkets as offering a huge variety of food, yet most of that huge variety comes from a single plant. How can this be? Corn is what feeds the steer that become your steak. Corn feeds the chickens and the pigs. Corns feed the catfish raised on a fish farm. Corn feed chickens lay the eggs. Corn feeds the dairy cows that produce the milk, cheese, and ice cream. See those chicken nuggets in your freezer case? They're really corn wrapped up in more corn. The chicken was fed corn. The batter was made from corn flour. The starch that holds it together is cornstarch. The oil that it was fried in, corn oil. Now turn to page 34. Back when George's grandfather started farming, farmers grew their own seed. That's the way farmers have always gotten their seed. They just kept some of their crop to be planted for the next season. Then in the 1930s, seed companies came up with a new kind of corn seed, hybrid corn. A hybrid is a plant or animal whose parents have different traits. For example, you might take a type of corn that resists diseases and cross it with another type of corn that produces a lot of ears. The result is a hybrid, a disease-resistant plant that produces a lot of corn. Sounds good, right? The catch is that the hybrid corn does not come true. The first crop planted from the hybrid corn seed will all be identical. The plant will have all the good traits the seed company promises, but the children of the crop will be mixed. Some plants will be like their hybrid parents, but most will not. The only way to make sure your plants produce the same amount of corn, that they have the same yield as the original hybrid, is to buy new seeds every year from the seed company. Hybrid corn quadrupled the yields for farmers from about 20 bushels per acre to about 80 bushels per acre. This was the beginning of a major change in the way farmers operated and the way we get our food. In a way, it was the beginning of the industrial food chain. The secret of modern corn hybrid is that they can be planted very close together. Before, hybrid farmers could plant 8,000 corn plants in an acre. Today, George can grow 30,000 plants in an acre. Hybrids have been bred for thicker stalks and stronger root systems, the better to stand upright in a crowd. This is also makes it possible to harvest them with a large machine. Basically, the plant lives in a city of corn grown together in neat rows. New hybrids have increased farm yield to about 180 bushels per acre. One bushel holds 56 pounds of kernels. So 180 bushels is slightly more than 10,000 pounds of food per acre. The field George and I planted that day would produce 1.8 million pounds of corn. Not bad for a day's work sitting down, I thought to myself. Frankenseed. When farmers first planted hybrid corns in the 1930s, their yields doubled or tripled. But if they planted the same seed from that first crop, yields dropped again. Since the second generation of corn was not identical to the first generation, the only way to get the higher yield was to buy seed from seed companies. Soon, the only way for a farmer to compete was to buy hybrid seed every year. Even if farmers faced hard times, the seed companies continued to make money year after year, selling farmers something they used to grow themselves. Today, the seed companies have taken things a step further. Genetically modified corn seed, or GMO, for genetically modified organisms, provide even higher yields than hybrid seeds. GMO corn is not bred the old-fashioned way by crossing corn plants. It is created in a laboratory by adding genes to corn's DNA. The new genes don't come from corn plants. They might come from a bacteria or some other organism. So with human health, corn can now take genes from other plants and animals. This opens up a whole new world of possibilities for the plant and its breeders. These new GMO seeds could be a bonanza for the seed company. No one can own the specific called corn. It is part of the natural world, the company property of all humanity. But with GMOs, a company can own a patent on a living organism. When Monsanto or other corporations invest in a new type of corn, it belongs to them, and they can charge farmers for the right to grow it. But many farmers, like George Nealon, refuse to grow GMO crops. They believe that GMOs are a reckless experiment with the natural order of things. Turn to page 46. Rich fields, poor farmers. The industrial food chain makes some people very rich. Big agribusiness companies take in billions of dollars in profit. Yet one person who is not getting rich from the mountain of corn is the American farmer. George Naylor is all about going broke. He's doing better than many of his other neighbors. His farm might feed 140 people, but it doesn't support the 4 who live on it. They have a garden and some laying hens, but don't grow most of their own food. The farmers doesn't produce enough income to pay their bills. The family only gets by because of the paycheck George's wife, Peggy, brings home from her job, and because of a subsidy check from the US government. If the American farmer is more productive than ever before, how come so many farmers are going broke? One morning after George had his crop planted, I sat down with him at his kitchen table and we talked about the problem. The answer is a little complicated, but but it boils down to this. The price of corn is kept low by the government policies. The low price means there's plenty of cheap corn for the industrial food chain. It means cheap animal feed to produce cheap meat and cheap high fructose corn syrup for soft drinks. It means corn can stay king of the supermarket, but it also makes it harder for the average farmer to stay in business, even with government payments. In the United States, the price of corn is usually below what it costs for it to grow. For example, when I visited George Nealon in 2005, the cost him about $2.50 to grow a bushel of corn. That cost included things like fertilizer, seed, pesticide, and gas for the tractor and combine. But that year, the price the grain elevated co-op paid for a bushel of corn was only about $1.45. At that price, Nealon would have lost more than $1 on every bushel of corn. With prices like that, how can Nealon and the other corn farmers stay in business? Because the government pays them part of the difference. In some years, nearly half of the income of Americans' corn farmers comes from government checks. It is these government checks or subsidies that keep corn and soybean prices low. Yet, the payments are never quite enough to cover the expenses. That's why Peggy Nealon had to have a job off the farm. That's also why a lot of farmers go out of business or just give up and retire. I asked George Nealon why he doesn't grow something besides corn, and he laughed. What am I going to grow here? Broccoli? Lettuce? The grain elevator is the only one buying in town, and the elevator only pays for corn and soybean. The government will give payments to farmers for all the corn they can produce, but not for growing vegetables or fruits. Besides, Nealon has the equipment to plant corn and soybean. He doesn't have the equipment to grow that lettuce or broccoli or anything else. Greg Nealon finds himself in the same trap as all the other corn and soybean farmers in America. When prices fall, the only way they can stay in business is to find a way to grow even more corn or soy. One way is to boost yield per acre. That means using more chemical fertilizers or maybe trying the new hybrids or GMO seeds. Another way is to rent more farmland, maybe from your neighbor who is giving it up. After all, if you already have the tractor machinery, it doesn't cost that much more to farm another 100 acres for another 500. This means bigger and bigger farms. Workers buy fewer farmers. It means more fertilized pollution. It means even more corn on top of the bulging mountain of corn. And that's the catch. The farmers produce more corn. The prices fall even more. Then the only thing an industrial farmer like George Nealon can do is to try to grow even more corn. It's a vicious circle. Prices go lower, but the mountain of corn gets higher and higher. The higher price of cheap corn. Okay, so farmers like George Nealon are having a hard time. Everyone agrees that it is a bad thing, but isn't the system still doing what it's supposed to do? Doesn't it produce cheap food for the American people? The problem is the government policies don't really give us cheap food. It only gives us the kind of cheap food made from corn or soy. Your soft drinks or hamburgers may be cheaper, but that's because taxpayers have already paid for part of it. Please look at the gray box on page 49, the ethanol boom. In 2006, the rise of fuel prices and fears of global warming growing, the US government looked around for alternatives to gas and oil. And what did they find? Why, corn, of course. Suddenly, corn in the form of ethanol was a solution to our energy problems. Ethanol is a kind of alcohol that can be added to gasoline and burned in cars and trucks. It is made from plants such as corn and sugarcane. Likely, there was a government subsidy mountain of corn ready to become car fuel. In 2008, as the gasoline prices shot up, demand for ethanol rose. This drove up prices for corn. Since then, gas prices have come back down. So has the price of corn. Is corn a good source of alternative fuel? It takes a lot of energy to turn corn into ethanol. In fact, making ethanol may use more energy than it produces. Many environmentalists think it's better to run cars on electricity from renewable sources or ethanol made from non-food crops like grass. Please turn back to page 49. I'm sorry, please turn back to page 47. Find the gray box that says subsidy backs. In the 12 years between 1995 and 2006, 177.6 billion were paid to farmers' subsidies. Taxpayers have spent 56 billion on corn subsidies paid to over 1.5 million recipients, making it the top crop for food assistance. 10% of all recipients collect 74% of the subsidies, amounting to 130.6 billion. Recipients in the top 10% average $36,290 in annual payment between 1995 and 2006. The bottom 80% of the recipients saw only $731 on average per year. The single top subsidy recipient received $554 million over this time period.